Welcome to Georgetown. Welcome to the School of Foreign Service, the oldest school of international affairs in the United States, and the very best school of international affairs in the world. So let me start first by telling you a little bit about SFS. As I said, the oldest school of international affairs in the United States. We were started in 1919. We celebrated our 100th anniversary in 2019. We were started at a very particular moment in global affairs. We were started in the shadow of the most devastating global conflict that the world had ever experienced, with tens of millions killed. We were started at the moment of a global pandemic, another global pandemic, the Spanish flu, again, in which millions were killed. We were started at a time with a recognition of truly global issues that could create truly devastating consequences for everyone across the globe. That was the moment where the founders of this school came together and said, we need a new institution. We need a new way of thinking about the world. We need, as our founder said on the very day that school was inaugurated, unprepared as we were for war, we are resolved never again to be unprepared for the peace. And we were created at a moment where every aspect of the global order was in flux. In fact, the radicalness of the idea of creating a school dedicated to training a new generation of leaders, to usher in a new century of global problems, was so strong that the founders of the school actually requested Congress for a space for the new school on the National Mall, along with the other monuments to America's history and future. We didn't get to the National Mall, but instead we are here on this beautiful hilltop campus, and we're proud to be here. But it gives you a sense of the import, the critical and consequential moment in which this school was created. This was a school because it was created in the shadow of war, because it was created in the shadow of destruction, and because it was designed to pull countries out of a national isolation that so many of them were facing, especially this country, the United States. It was designed with a particular idea in mind, and that was to build empathy, to build global understanding, to build cross-cultural engagement and dialogue, and built on an empathy that would enable the next generation of leaders to see the world and the world's problems as others see them. And that's why from the very start we have always built an interdisciplinary curriculum that is rooted in language and understanding languages, that is rooted in understanding the intersection of history, culture, politics, economics, in whatever part of the world or whatever issue area that we are looking with. And it is designed to build that empathy through which only you can build a genuine understanding and look for solutions to the world. So we were created for a mission. We are a mission-driven school, and we have been a mission-driven school for the entire century of our existence. And now, 100 years later, we find ourselves at a moment as critical, as consequential as the very day the school was inaugurated. You are committing yourself to a professional career path of service to the world at one of the most fraught and difficult moments in our history. We come together not in the aftermath of a war, like our founder, but in the midst of war and the tremendous suffering that war brings to so many. We come together in the midst of humanitarian crises that have placed the innocent in peril. We come together in a moment when authoritarian leaders and movements are increasingly restricting the rights and freedoms of their own people, and particularly, in so many cases, the rights of women over their own destinies. We come together at a moment that despite some high-profile cases that we've seen in the recent prisoner exchanges, there are still so many hostages and political prisoners who languish in captivity, not for what they have done, but for what they represent. And yet, there are still signs of hope. Student movements are mobilizing to fight against corrupt leaders, and what we've seen in the extraordinary scenes from Dhaka, Bangladesh. Elections are underway with real consequences for nearly half the world's population. More and more countries, once marginalized in the fog of great power competition, are demanding that their voices be heard in a new global order that represents their interests in a way that we haven't seen before. What a time to be doing what you're doing here at SFS. Our history and our location here in Washington, D.C., though, come with an obligation. We have an obligation to ask the tough questions. We have an obligation to challenge conventional wisdom and to think outside the box, because whatever we've been doing inside the box has not resolved the kind of existential crises that we are currently facing. We have an obligation to understand the context for violence, even as we recognize and condemn the human costs of that violence, but we need to understand it. This is the place to probe, to test, to innovate, to challenge, all in the hope of coming up, sometimes bit by bit, sometimes in a circuitous way with a pathway that's not clear, but coming up with new ways to address the most complex challenges that your generation will be tasked to solve. If we, here at the school, are doing our job, your diplomacy, and sometimes even your core beliefs will be tested. Here in our classrooms, within your cohorts, our visiting speakers, you'll be confronted by views, many of you which you will strongly disagree with. You may be confronted by views that you even find offensive and difficult. You will be challenged, you will be provoked, and on occasion, you'll even be angry and even enraged. We're not here to protect you from difficult views. And while this campus is a space and must be a space for you to do that questioning, to engage in debate, to express your passions, to shake the maddening complacency of others in response to the human suffering we see around us in the world, I want you to remember two things. First, among you, sitting in this hall with you, are not just people who relish the verbal sparring and the rough and tumble of debate, the intellectual engagement. Sitting among you are Gazans who have lost so many loved ones and whose families are now searching for food, for shelter, and for education for their children. Sitting among you are Ukrainian students whose parents are routinely sheltering in basements and subways in fear of attack. Sitting among you are Sudanese facing one of the great crises of hunger brought around by conflict. Sitting among you are those who have been forced to flee their homes and their countries in the largest wave of forced migration the world has ever seen. And sitting among you are soldiers who have served or are serving their country, defending freedom, fighting off invaders, or defending the rights of their states to exist. There are people who have lived and are living through the trauma of the theories that we study here. It's very real to them. So remember, when you make your arguments, when you spark your debates, when you play devil's advocate, remember that there are people whose lives have been and continue to be deeply impacted by the crises that we are discussing and that we are trying to solve. Show them the respect they deserve, even as we disagree over the narratives and the root causes of the challenges that we are confronting. But let's also remember one other thing. We are a school of diplomacy. In our classrooms, we will learn about the history of diplomacy. We'll examine case studies of key diplomatic events. We'll learn about the drivers and the narratives and the contexts that shape international affairs. But as we study diplomacy, our task is also to inculcate within ourselves the practice of diplomacy, the practice of engaging across difference to seek durable solutions. That is an obligation that comes with being at the world's most prominent school of international affairs. And if we can't do it, why would we expect anyone else to be able to do it? So if we worry about political polarization gripping so many parts of the world, if we fret about the coarseness of our political dialogue, if we are concerned about the increasing grip of autocrats who rely on stoking populism to take away the freedoms of their own people, then we must model a different approach. We must model a way to work together, to seek compromise across difference, to recognize the difference, to acknowledge the difference, to explore the difference, but to use that exploration to generate new solutions, new ideas to our most complex problems at a time when we need it most. This is what it means to join the oldest school of international affairs in this country and the very best school of international affairs in the world. As I said, if we can't do it, who will? So this is the obligation you take on in joining this community. This is the obligation that has never been more important. It's an exciting obligation. It's an energizing moment to be doing what you're doing, to committing yourselves to service. I welcome you here. I welcome your passion, your excitement, your eagerness to get started. And we all can't wait to see what you will achieve.